Okay, so we begin today's Simone Weil. Hopefully was refreshing after reading Levinas and Marcel. So let's start our therapy session about the reading. Let's start our poll. Let's see, are there any 10s for Simone Weil? 10s, okay, 9. All right, there's a lot, wow. The rest of you, can we see your faces, please? Thank you. Any 7s? All right, 6. There's a lot of you who like Simone Weil. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what? There's no haters? Let's start with people who had some reservations. Any criticism? Anything that disturbed you a bit about the reading? Let's hear it. Nothing. There was one issue that a lot of you brought up was when she talks about on page 108, the last paragraph, the immense privilege God has reserved for the poor, right? And all of you were like, what? No, right? What do you mean the poor have a privilege? Anyone want to try to respond to that? Did you talk about it in your groups? Were you able to resolve this issue? Why are the poor privileged compared to the wealthy, for instance? What do you think? Okay, guys, somebody speak. One way to answer that question, hold on. Their content, are they though? Are the poor content?
No, I'm going to try to answer it.
All right.
From what I gathered, what I was reading from her is, and I read a little bit of the Tao, whatever. You know, it's the rich or the greedy. It seems that they're always pursuing. I think that she talked a little bit about that. And they're always seeking, right? And this may be for a reason. It may be for a reason that there may be this hole or emptiness that spirituality can fill. And the poor are not content because they're poor. They absolutely don't want to be poor and work as hard as they do. But perhaps they may be more connected spiritually.
That's what she seems to be saying when she says she assimilates the poor with physical work, right? So she's looking at laborers, people who are, using their bodies, right, to work, and who are exhausted at the end of the day. So she seems to be saying the poor are more in contact with reality, and therefore, like you're saying, Rodriguez, perhaps more in contact with spirituality, which for Simone Weil is embedded in reality, right? So that's right, like Nietzsche, Marcel, all of them say, right, the more you enter reality, the more you connect to mystery. The less you enter, and she says the wealthy often don't enter reality. They're in their, condos, separated from the world. They drive in their cars, right? They don't really enter reality in many ways, right? In the same way that the poor do through the physical labor. And so she's saying they don't therefore have access to the depth of reality that the poor might have access to if they didn't have the fatigue, the money worries, and so forth, right? So it's one way to
say something.
Go ahead, Trujillo.
Yes, she also makes like a parallel between the strong and the weak. So I guess she also considers the poor to be weak because they don't have voice.
Yes, I think yes, and in that way also, right? You might be closer to that because in the weakness you are more dependent, you are more receptive, perhaps. That's another way to see it. Nietzsche would not be happy with that answer, obviously. To kind of celebrate weakness, he would be like, some of you mentioned that, right? Some of you already thinking like Nietzsche, like, oh yeah, so weakness is good, so let's stay poor. And then we never, again, right, escaping the real reality. Excellent. So, and by the way, Simone Weil is not in a good place to be talking about poverty, right? she has never really experienced it. So, but some of it makes sense, right? If you think about it. Good. All right. Yes.
Maybe, sorry, maybe she's not in condition to talk about poverty, but the fact that she likes to be with the laborers, with the poor people, it makes her having that experience and know how they live.
Yeah, she's certainly sensitive and permeable to what's happening, and then she's trying to make sense of it, right? So in a way, yeah, you can say that she could speak about it since she is sensitive enough to sense, to connect to it, right? Absolutely. Good. Any lovers of Simone Weil? Let's hear a little bit on what you liked about her.
I like that she has the idea of simplicity, the Eastern thought. I like that.
Yeah, Jolebas, your paper was really good. Because of your knowledge, right? Your background in Eastern thought. So I wrote down a couple quotes that I'm going to use later. So yeah. So definitely for those of you who are well-versed in Eastern thought, she becomes very interesting towards the end, right? When she starts to refer to it. And I think you were one of the people who understood very well what she's doing, I think, in your paper. And I'll come back to that, right? Very good. Excellent. Anybody else? Yes? Any other lovers?
Yeah, I came from it from a social reform point of view. Um, I like how she talked about justice. Um, I think I probably even wrote that she would be appalled at what justice, what the American legal system looks like. Mass incarceration, right? A different type of, and just trying to look at it through her lens. And I like that she used that the priestly that judges and should be priestly. I enjoy that. That's one of the things.
We're going to go deeply into this notion of priesthood, right? Which for her, everybody can be a priest, as we'll see today. Okay, anything else before we start? All right. Okay, so today I'm going to look mostly at, well, the first section will be looking, focusing on the section on the love of the neighbor. And the second section will be focusing on this notion of waiting for God, right? So let's begin at the beginning of the text, which is on page 84, I think. Yeah, page 83. Okay, so let me reiterate what she's doing, right? The background. So remember, she's very similar to Rumi and Maimonides, who both talk about the necessity to prepare before we can connect to God. The reason a lot of us are having trouble connecting is because our hearts or our minds are not prepared, right? So Maimonides talks about decluttering the mind, expanding the mind, right? Rumi talks about purifying the heart through suffering. In a way, God purifies the heart for us, right? But also the notion of forgiveness that we talked about, which we can proactively do in order to receive, be more connected, right, to the divine within. Some of you really, by the way, I wanted to say in your tests on Rumi, some of you clarified it for me, right? There was a couple tests which talked about we purify the heart because God is within the heart, right? And so now we can better sense. I hadn't thought of it like that. So thank you to the few of you who wrote the test like that, right? That we purify the heart so we can better feel the presence of God, which is already there, but which cannot radiate because there's so much clutter and toxicity and so forth, right? So we kind of clear the path, right, for the inner light to shine through. So very good. So same thing here, right, with Simone Weil. We need some period of preparation before we can have any type of encounter. And so she talks about the three implicit loves of God that we have to develop first before getting to a direct encounter. Can anyone tell me what are these three implicit loves of God? This is on page 83. Go to page 83.
I think it's religion ceremonies, the beauty of the world, and our neighbor.
Very good. Religious ceremonies, the beauty of the world, and our neighbor. I'm writing them down for you. Okay, so very good. So let's explain. So let's read the text, right, where she says that. So go to page 83, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. Everybody there, wave at me if you're there. Okay, good. All right, so I'm reading. The implicit love of God can have only three immediate objects. The only three things here below in which God is really, though secretly present. So she's basically saying, very similar to Levinas, right? That the trace of God exists, not only within human beings though, right? She's seeing the trace of God also in the beauty of nature. She's seeing the trace of God in the religious ceremonies, right? So there are many places where we can encounter the implicit presence of God. And if we start to love this implicit presence, one day we can have an explicit encounter, right? So she talks about this, right? So it is necessary, therefore, to develop not only love of the neighbor first, right? Before you can love God, you have to learn to love the neighbor. That's prerequisite, right? In other words, the reason a lot of us are not connecting to God is look in your hearts, right? We have to look in our hearts. How loving are we towards each other? How much hatred and resentment are we harboring in our hearts? If we cannot get rid of those, we can never have the higher encounter, right? So she's saying before you can even dream about meeting God, you have to begin to detox your own heart, right? Similar to Rumi. Nature, right? If you can't have an appreciation of nature, your mind is small, she will say, right? Because nature is vastness, infinity, right? There is a presence in nature that we need to develop a sensitivity to, right? Nature is not just, I don't know, a bunch of trees, asphyxiating on the sidewalk in New York City, right? Real nature, like learning to really, first of all, go into real nature, and also learning to really sense, right? The presence of something sacred within nature. I sometimes walk, I'm very close to nature. I should have been a pagan. But I had a moment once. I was walking in a forest and there were the trees very tall, and then they formed a kind of high ceiling. And I felt like I was in a cathedral. Like, this is what she's talking about, right? Can you sense in nature the feeling of being in a cathedral, right? Because I was looking at the high ceiling that reminded me of the Catholic cathedrals, right? If you can't develop that, how can you receive God, right? Who is even greater and grander, right? And finally, right, the religious ceremonies, she's saying, and in the religious ceremonies, which a lot of us think are, pointless and pathetic and ridiculous, right? She's saying in those ceremonies, in these rituals, there is a meaning, there is a mystery being told, being narrated, right? How open are you to the mystery behind the rituals, to the mystery that the rituals are trying to express, right? So she doesn't see rituals like taking the communion bread or going to a billion of rituals, the baptism, the communion, all these rituals in Catholicism, which often make no sense because they are not explained properly, right? She's saying these rituals are the vessels of mysteries, right? They're poetry, right? Remember how I said about Rumi, how you have to decode the poetry in order to get to spiritual truths?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing, right? Rituals are a kind of poetry, right? They are a kind of more physical poetry. They're symbols. They're the same. It's as though if you enter a religious ceremony of any kind, it's poetic, right? Everything means something else, right? Everything, every object, every ritual, every picture points you to something deeper. And we have to learn to decode, right? And not just sit there like, zombies or idiots, right? So, and often, right, we are turned off because we think there is nothing, or it hasn't been well explained. So she's saying we have to also develop not only a love, but a respect, right, for religious ceremonies. And I believe she would say beyond even Catholicism, right? Any type of religious ceremony is a poem, has a poetic nature that we have to learn to decode to get to the deep spiritual meaning, right? Okay. So moving on to page 84, continuing on what she's saying, second paragraph, where she's saying you have to develop these loves before even dreaming of an encounter with God. She says this, second paragraph, It is probable that in most cases, the period of preparation does not draw towards its end. The soul is not ready to receive the personal visit of the master unless it has all three indirect loves to a high degree, right? So best way to prepare, right? Three things. How toxic is your heart, number one. Two, how sensitive are you to the mysteries of nature? And number three, are you sensitive to the poetry of the religious ceremony? These help you develop, right, your capacity to perceive mystery, right, to use Marcel's terms, right? So if you want, so remember Marcel, it's enough for Marcel to be open, right, to perceive the mystery or to begin to connect to mystery. Simone Weil is giving us some concrete advice, right? She's saying, learn to access the mystery through rituals, right? Learn to access the mystery through nature, and learn to access the mystery through the other human being, right? So she's a little more pragmatic than Marcel, right? But it's the same idea of accessing something deeper. Okay, now we get to the important part. So I'm going to focus on the one which is good for us, because most of us are not familiar with rituals. I'm going to focus on the I'm going to focus on the love of the neighbor, and then the religious rituals will be involved in that because she describes the love of the neighbor using Catholic language. So we'll talk about that. Now again, let me remind you, right? Simone Weil is easy to be disturbed by the very strong Catholic language she's using, but remember, she's using the language to transform it. Whatever she's saying, by the way, in this text, any Orthodox Catholic would be like, this is quite shocking, the way she is manipulating these concepts, these Catholic ideas. So she is quite interesting in the way that she reimagines what these concepts mean in a way that makes them accessible to a secular audience. Okay, so let me say that again. Make sure you write this down, that Simone Weil is not just blurting out Catholic ideology, right? She's taking these Catholic concepts and rituals, and she's reimagining them in a way that makes them accessible to a secular audience. In other words, at this point, when we're done reading Simone Weil, all of us can actually practice this. You don't have to be a Catholic to practice Christianity, according to Simone Weil, right? So we'll see how that works. Okay, so she's going to borrow, especially in her writing, from the Catholic concept of the sacraments. So let's talk a little bit about that, for those of us who don't know. Right, so she's going to draw on the sacraments, and then she's going to reimagine them and make them accessible. In other words, for her, you don't have to be Catholic to actually experience these sacraments. Anybody can do it. That's the revolutionary message, right, that is contained in this text, is that the sacraments are not reserved for Catholics, right? They are, everybody can taste and receive these sacraments, according to her. But she's going to reimagine what they mean first. Okay, so let's begin. What is a sacrament? Let's hear from our good Catholics in the class. What is a sacrament? Where are my Catholics? Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Where was I? Okay, you have time to think now. So, what is a sacrament? Oh, I see a bunch of chats. Did anyone answer? Oh, talking about me, I see. Okay. All right. Well, what is, nobody knows?
It's how you're initiated or not initiated. Depends, right? In the Catholic Church, you have different sacraments. So the first sacrament, which is baptism, it's like you're initiated into the church. You are now a member, and you've been you're rid of original sin.
Just so before you tell me the list of sacraments, we're gonna go over the list. What does it mean, the word sacrament? Tell the non-Catholics in the class what that word means. Anybody knows? See, y'all are not taught too good. Thank you, Trujillo. It's a ritual. Okay, so let me explain this. It's not just any ritual, right? A sacrament is a very special ritual. It's an action, right, that you perform, a ritual, but it's an action which has a performative value. In other words, it's an action which has power, which has an impact, not just on yourself, obviously, but it has an impact on God. In other words, anytime you perform the sacrament, what you are really doing, or the ritual, right, what you are really doing is at that moment, through the ritual, through your performance, you are attracting the divine presence into that moment. Okay, so everybody write down the definition. A sacrament, let me write it here also as I'm saying it. A sacrament is a ritual which draws the divine presence into my present, into my situation, into the present moment, right? So there is a lot of power in the sacrament. It's not just a symbolic action. It's not just an action which, you know, I should do to obey, right? It's an action which has power to draw the divine presence, the divine light into the situation, into your being, into the situation you're in, right? Very similar, I think we saw something similar with Maimonides when he talks about attracting divine providence, right? This is similar. This is a way to attract divine favor, divine blessing, divine presence, right? Into moments of your life. So now let's make a list of the sacraments and then we'll see. So Rodriguez mentioned baptism. What's the next one? Let's do it chronologically. Communion, okay. After that.
Penance.
Right after communion?
You're supposed to have penance before communion.
Okay, all right. And then confirmation. Now we have 4. And there are how many sacraments? Okay, marriage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there are 7 sacraments. What's the last 2?
The last one is the holy rites before you die, but then the 6th one is either going into priesthood.
Hands. Very good. Okay, I wrote them down for you, right? First one is baptism, communion, penance, confirmation, marriage, last rite. Sorry, that one's supposed to be last. And the laying of hands for healing, right? Or anointing with oil. Okay, now, every single one of these rituals as you're performing them, and most of us are familiar with the ritual of marriage, right? Which we have taken from this tradition, right? Anytime you're doing this particular sacrament, you are actually drawing the divine presence into your situation. So let's take the example of marriage, which we won't talk about here, but it's the clearest example. When you get married, right, in the right way, according to the Catholic rite, right, you are actually not only celebrating, right, and you know, signing papers and promising your endless fidelity, right? So there's more than that, right? At that moment, what you're doing is actually drawing the divine presence into your relationship, right? In other words, you are receiving special blessings, special strength, special grace, right, for your relationship. So at that moment, your relationship shifts ontologically, right? So there is an actual ontological shift according to Catholicism, right? In other words, there is a shift in the nature, in the being, in the substance of the relationship, which moves from one state to a different state. So there is actually a transformation occurring in your actual real transformation occurring in your relationship because of the divine spirit or energy which has entered it, right? So that's the most powerful one, right? Notion of marriage. By the way, Gabriel Marcel has beautiful pages on marriage. You should check it out. You know Marcel now. He talks about fidelity, and I'll just open a parenthesis on that because some of us need to hear this. You know how a lot of us, or you'll meet people like this who don't want to get married because they're afraid to make promises they can't keep, right? I mean, seriously, it's true. You meet them, you're 20. Are you going to still love them at 40? Like, you know, what happens if they change or you change? I mean, you don't know, right? So many people have abstained from marriage because they're afraid to make promises they can't keep. Marcel talks about the oath of fidelity as a creative act, meaning it's an act whereby we receive the divine inspiration, right? Just like when you create, you are always receiving an inspiration. So he's saying at that moment, it's not about you, right? You are, yes, you are powerless, you don't know, but you are receiving this powerful inspiration that will make things work out, right, according to Marcel. So that's, right. So anyway, so that gives you an idea, right, a little bit. So Simone Weil is going to talk about the two sacraments. She's going to talk about communion and baptism, right? So we need to talk a little bit about them so we have an idea what they are, and then we'll look into the text, how she reimagines them. Okay, what's baptism? Anybody can tell me? Yes, very good, Campbell and Bernard, right? It's like a rebirth. So this is more in the Protestant context, I thought. But let me talk about both, right? So baptism in Catholicism is as a baby, right? So you might wonder, why would the baby need to be reborn? Was just born, right? So in the Catholic context, it has to do with wiping away the original sin, giving a fresh start to the baby, right? Since according to Catholicism, we are born sinful, right? The sin is transmitted genetically. It's not far from the truth, right? So you cleanse the baby from the original sin, giving the baby fresh start. In Protestantism, there is also the ritual of baptism. You're usually an adult or older when you do it. It's a rebirth. You're cleansing from your past sins. You're giving yourself a fresh start, right? So in both Catholicism and Protestantism, but more powerfully in Catholicism, there is an actual cleansing going on, inner spiritual cleansing going on as you're receiving the drops of water, right? Or being immersed. So because it's a sacrament, it's a powerful act which draws the presence of God. At that moment, right, in the moment of baptism, you are really yourself. There is an ontological shift within yourself, right? You are transmuted from, you're turned into a new person. You're given a new beginning. Make sure you write this down, this notion of new beginning. We'll come back to it, right? In other words, you're given a fresh start, clean slate. Something in you genuinely shifts at that moment, according to Catholicism, right? Okay, what is communion? So it's like the first communion, right? That you take when you're like 8 or 9 years old. What's going on there? What's happening?
It's when you receive the host, which is, for Catholics, it's the body of Christ. The word we use is I always have a problem with that, transubstantiation. We believe literally that the body of Christ has converted, we're taking, that's why it's called communion or Eucharist. You're literally taking this host and now you're one with God, with Christ.
Very good, right? Yeah, so exactly, right? You are actually, when you're eating the bread, you're not just eating bread. I think that's what the Catholics are trying to say through the very technical language. They're saying you're not just eating bread, something is actually happening on the spiritual level. You are actually not only eating bread, but eating God. In other words, you are receiving the actual presence of God within your body. And so you can be at that point where the Sufis talk about, right? God is within. When you eat, you are in a way performing this. You are making God within, right? You are allowing God within. So I think that's what Catholicism means through the complicated language of transubstantiation, right? It simply means this: you're not just eating bread. Something is going on a deeper level, on an ontological level. You are actually receiving the actual presence of God. Obviously, it's not in the particles of the bread, it's a spiritual presence, but it's, right, as you are eating this, you are allowing, right, the presence of God to enter you. It's a very powerful truth, right, in Catholicism. So, okay, so now we know both, right? We know both, now we're ready to get into the text. So let's look first at how Simone Weil reimagines communion. Okay, go to page 84 and you go to the last paragraph. Looking at the time. Okay, so last paragraph, it begins with the text of the gospel. Let me make sure everybody's there. Are you all there? Put your hand. The text of the gospel. Okay. All right. So let's see what she says. The text of the gospel is concerned only with Christ's presence in the sufferer. Okay, so we can see already she's alluding to the communion, right? Yet it seems as though the spiritual worthiness of him who receives has nothing to do with the matter. It must then be admitted that it is the benefactor himself, as a bearer of Christ, who causes Christ to enter the famished sufferer with the bread he gives him. Right? The other can consent or not, exactly like the person who goes to communion. Okay, so here he's talking about something very special. He's talking about loving our neighbor, right? Now, she's going further and she's saying, loving our neighbor is not just a feel-good act that helps the person momentarily. And, you know, for example, you help someone with homework and now they're better at their homework. She says something very powerful is going on deeper. Anytime you help your neighbor, there's something else going on. Anytime you help someone cross the street, or you carry someone's groceries, or I'm talking about, right, or you help someone with homework, or you help someone with money problems. She's saying you are doing much more. You are helping them on the material level, but you are also having an action on them spiritually. What is that action? What do you think she's talking about? What is this more that we're doing beyond just carrying the groceries and helping with homework? What else is going on as you're doing that? Y'all are sluggish today. Wake up. And I don't want only Rodriguez to talk. Okay, very good, Bernard. Okay, excellent, right? So this is very powerful. She's saying more than just helping them superficially with whatever they need. You are also restoring something in them spiritually, right? You are also restoring what she calls the image of God, the presence of God, the light of God. In other words, anytime you help someone, you are restoring them on a much deeper level than just the mere help you're doing. So let me give you an example of this so you have an idea what it means. Okay, suppose you have like a younger friend or a sibling and they really suck at math. They can't do math, they're a complete dummy when it comes to math. Like they freeze, they're paralyzed, they have F everywhere, right? And you decide, okay, it's time for me to help you with your math, right? Now, let's imagine how is your little friend feeling about their incapacity to get good grades in math? How do they feel about themselves beyond just the bad grade? What does the bad grade tell them about them? Do they feel intelligent, sophisticated? Okay, very good, Simone, right? It's not, so the math, this bad grade in the math, it's worse than just a bad grade on the report card. It is affecting them in their own psyche, in their own subjectivity, right? They realize, well, I must be dumb, right? Or like some of you said, I'm unworthy, right? So now their whole dignity is starting to dissolve. They're feeling like this, you know, they're feeling low, they're feeling stupid, unworthy, and so forth, right? Now, imagine you come along and you help them with their math, and the next time they do the test, they get an A. Okay, so they have an A on the report card. But what else happened below the surface in their own identity and selfhood? What did you do to their selfhood beyond just the good grade and the money they'll get from their parents? Exactly, Trujillo, right? You have shifted something in them deeply within their identity. At this point now, they walk taller, they're confident, they feel better about themselves. In other words, you've not just restored their math grade, you've restored them, okay? That's what she's talking about, right? When you help, when you love someone, you're not just, you know, when you help someone, you're not just helping them on the material level. Of course you are, right? But you're also capable of restoring them, of giving them back who they were, of helping them reconnect to their highest self, right? So you're giving them back their highest self. You are giving them back their dignity, their worthiness, the image of God that has been hidden, right? Is able to radiate again, right? So that's what she means by communion, right? Yes, Blades, go ahead, speak.
I guess I just wanted to add, because it made me think of, I guess, Bell Hooks' definition of love, which is like spiritual, the like endeavor to like spiritually nurture someone else.
Yes, excellent, excellent, very good. Yes, it's not just about the sex or the comfort or, you know, being less lonely and, you know, having someone cooking for you or someone bringing, you know, paying the bills. It's more than that, right? When you love someone, really, you are spiritually nurturing them. You are whatever has been shattered in them by their past, you are building up again, right? So whatever wounds they have, you are healing. Whatever insecurities, you are making right. In other words, you're fixing. You are, we'll talk about the recreation with the baptism, but you are really restoring something that was lost through the love. That's it. We have to measure. I mean, we don't measure often enough how powerful love is, right? Martin Luther King talks about love as a force, right? He talks it as of love as a force for social change, but we don't realize how love can also be a force in our relationships. We can shift things deeply in our relationships simply by practicing love, or diligently and patiently, right? As you practice love, you have the power to shift the other in a very deep way, to restore what has been lost and broken, right? That's what she means when she says you are giving them communion. At that moment, you are like a priest. You are transmitting to them the divine presence, energy, image, light that they have lost, right? In other words, you are giving them back their light that they have lost, right? It's a transfer of energy, right? Not from you, because you're a priest, you're a mediator, right? Your love is transmitting a higher energy to them than what you even have yourself, right? That's what she means by anytime you love someone, anytime, any small action, you are having this powerful communion moment, right? Where you are restoring in the other person, right? Their dignity, their light, their radiance, the image of God, right? Their worthiness and so forth. Okay, very good. Now, let's go to the next one, which is baptism. So turn with me to page 90. And I'm going to start at the last sentence of 89. So let me make sure everyone's there. Everybody's the last sentence of 89? Put your hand out. Nobody? Last sentence of 89. Hands? Just one hand? Okay, thank you. Okay, so she begins. Speaking of the other, right? The other, the vulnerable, needy other, right? He who being reduced by affliction to the state of an inert and passive thing. So affliction, right? Suffering can really demean somebody, right? We are demeaned by our sufferings. We are made small by our sufferings. And she says, that person, when you help them, returns, at least for a time, to the state of a human being through the generosity of others, right? So we talked about this with also communion, same idea, but there's something more going on here. Such a one, if he knows how to accept and feel the true essence of this generosity, receives at the very instant a soul begotten exclusively of charity. And here she says, this is what you underline, he is born from on high of water and of the Spirit. Skipping, to treat our neighbor who is in affliction with love is something like baptizing him. Okay, so what does it mean to baptize someone with your love? Give me some ideas. It's poetry, right? So what does the symbol mean to baptize someone with your love? It's good, you're giving me time to drink. All right, Bernard, yes. Can you elaborate? Tell us more. This sounds interesting, Bernard.
Like the way that it restores their humanity, maybe it gives them hope that they can rise out of their affliction or out of their suffering, so to speak, and gain like a new relationship with God, like they have another chance to reconnect.
Okay, in other words, one way that we baptize someone is to give them a new beginning, right? And I'm going to talk about this in a second, this notion of a new beginning that we are capable of bestowing on each other, right? But definitely there is a rebirth, there is a clean slate, there is a new beginning, there the element of hope present, and I'm going to elaborate on that. But let me hear a few others, a couple more. So
I'll
Cholevas,
add on.
helping someone spreads far, the person helps. So yes, absolutely, right? Once you've revived someone, they can revive others, right? Cholevas, very good. Any other?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'd say I guess getting into a new relationship or being in a relationship, you can give someone kind of room to transform themselves in a way,
Very good.
giving
Absolutely.
them space to evolve.
Yeah, I really like that. Absolutely. Let me reformulate what you said, because it goes back to what I think Olivas. Why am I freezing all the time? Hello, am I here? Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Let me reformulate. Oh my God. Okay. Let me reformulate what you were saying. Yes. When you're in a relationship, say it again, Blades. I lost it now with all this. Say it again.
I'm sorry. Okay, I mean, I think when you get into a new relationship or you're in a relationship with a partner, that kind of gives you space to explore yourself. There's room that you can have to transform, to evolve in your own kind of way where you're comfortable because you feel loved, and there's room for you to, like, if you're loved unconditionally, grow in the way that you want to grow and transform.
Absolutely. Anytime you love someone for real, right, you are giving them a chance to start over, right? Anything they were before, you're giving them a chance, right? You're giving them the space to be someone else. Now, most of us don't love in that way, right? Most of us, we love and we're like, I can't love you until you change this, right? What she's saying is that love is the only way for the person to change, right? You can't ask for the change and then love, right? This ability to give the space to the other for a new beginning, to give them the space to transform at their own rhythm, to have the patience to hold them in this space, right? I think Blades Bell Hooks also talks about that, right? To have the patience to, and anyways, all her books are about holding a space, especially for men, right? She talks a lot about men to transform and to grow, right? So absolutely. So love is not just restoring the image of God. I mean, in a way it is, right? Because you are allowing the person to blossom, right? You're not just kindling, right? This spark or this light. You are also helping the person become more than they have been until they met you, right? And again, right, we forget how love can become a force of nurture, right? You can nurture someone's growth and someone's transformation through your love. Now, they will tell you, you can't change them. Don't try to change your partner. And it's true, you can't, but make sure you write this down. This is so important because we have been cheated out of this experience. We can't change the partner, but we can create the conditions where they can change. Please write this down, right? Because they keep on saying, don't try to change me, or don't try to change your partner. It's true. We don't have power over each other like that, but we can certainly create the conditions where they can begin to change by themselves or want to change. And that's what baptizing means, right? Again, it's a powerful action, right? To love in this way, you have an impact. You are creating a new creation, right? Or you're allowing, not creating. We don't create. You're allowing that person to be reborn, to transform, to grow. So very good. And yes, and to go back to Jolevas, the notion of hope is important there, because if you don't have hope, if you don't see the potential of a person, right? If you can't see beyond the appearances, because that's what hope is, right? Hope is able to see more and to long for more. You cannot nurture that person, right? You will give up, you'll fall into despair, right? So hope is indispensable part of love, right? Okay, we're learning to love already. I'm already doing my next class in July. I'm already starting with you. Okay, excellent. Okay, so in conclusion, right, what we're noticing here is that what Simone Weil is doing, which is extremely powerful, is she's taking the Mass and all its sacraments, which are supposed to be within the limitation of the church, right? Within the boundaries of the church. If you're not Catholic, you can't get baptized, you can't receive communion, you can't get married, right? And so in a way, these are for the privileged few. Simone Weil is going to say, no, I'm going to take the sacraments into the street, right? She basically goes into the sanctuary, takes all the sacraments, puts them in a bag, rushes outside, and throws them to the people who are walking by. That's what Simone Weil is doing visually, right? She's taking the most holy rituals, the most holy items of the church, which have been for centuries protected, guarded, right? Limited entry. And she's taking them like in a big bag, and she's going the street and saying, here, here, here. you can all, according to Simone Weil, all of us can either be a priest or the recipient of the priest, right? She's taking the mass into the street. And she's saying all of us can experience baptism, and all of us can bestow baptism, right? All of us can experience communion, and all of us can give it, right? We are a kingdom of priests, all of us. Whether you're a Catholic or not, you can receive communion and you can give it. Whether you're Catholic or not, you can receive baptism and you can give it simply by loving or by receiving love, right? That's what she's saying. Very powerful message, right? Very, very close, obviously, to the actual teachings of Jesus, right? The church has become more and more complex, leaving behind the simplicity, right, of the teachings of Jesus, which was simply, please, can you love each other, right? Okay. Any questions on this section before we take a break? Anybody want to clarify anything or has a doubt?
Can you repeat really quick what you meant by the first one, being in nature or loving nature?
Yeah, so
I feel
yes.
we're breaking up a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So according to Simone Weil, right, the presence of God is not limited to the inside of a church, right? You can sense God in the world. You can sense God through relationship. You can sense God through nature. You can sense God, obviously, in the church through the sacraments, but she's saying God is also outside. It's one of the reasons she didn't get baptized, right? She said, no, I feel God here, right? So anywhere you go in the world, right, you can sense God in nature or even in what's going on in the world, right? The world for Simone Weil is filled with the presence of God. You're on the subway, God is there, right? You're climbing a tree, God is there. You're walking by the ocean, God is there. You're walking in Times Square, God is there, right? That's what she means. God is not limited to the narrow space of the church. Does that make sense?
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Rodriguez, of course, the Catholic Orthodoxy must not be happy. No, this is not very Catholic what she's doing, right? Making everything accessible to everyone. She's democratizing. Democratizing, is that a word? Somebody help me. Is this a word, democratizing? I'm going to write it down. Making it
I've seen it used before.
Okay, thank you. How do you pronounce it, though? Can you do it, Blades? You're American.
So I think it's democratizing.
There you go,
Democratizing.
I was saying it wrong. Okay, I never know the accents. Okay, democratizing. She's democratizing this faith, which has been very, you have to be an initiate to have it. She's saying, no, everybody, let's all do it. Right, very good. Any other comments before we take a break? All right, a break it is. It's 5:09. Let's meet again at 5:15. Exactly 5:15. I'm going to stop the recording.